He certainly, Manaha, mind, Krishna, O Krishna, Pramathi, agitating, Balavad, strong, Dridham, obstinate, Tasya, its, Aham, I, Nigraham, subduing, Manye, think, Vayoho, of the wind, Iva, like, Suduskaram, difficult. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: for the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it is, it seems to me, more difficult than controlling the wind. Translation with repetition: for the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it is, it seems to me, more difficult than controlling the wind. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence, although mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium towards both friend and enemy, but ultimately no worldly man can do so, for this is more difficult than controlling the rising wind. In the Vedic literatures, it is said, Atmanam Rathinam Vidhi, Sariram Rathamevacha, Buddhim tu Sarathim Vidhi, Manah Pragraham Evacha, Indriyani Hayanahur, Vishayam Steshu Gocharan, Atmendriya Mano Yuktam, Bhokteti Ahur Manishinaha. The individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence. Such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance, in all humility. The method prescribed is Savai Manah Krishna Padara Vindayoho. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. Thus ends the wonderful transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So we have this very interesting and very practical verse from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 6.34. We are in the 6th chapter. And the title for today's class is I May Control the Wind, but. Interestingly, in this series of verses that we are seeing in the 6th chapter, this verse and the previous verse is spoken by Arjuna in defiance, where he's telling that whatever you have spoken so far, O Krishna, O Janardana, O Madhusudana, O killer of the demon Madhu, impractical and unendurable for me. I can't do this. And why can't he do it? Because as per Arjuna, he's saying that maybe controlling the wind is possible, but how can I control this mind, which is so difficult to control? And to delve a little more into this, what we are trying to discuss or what we are trying to see, and what is the thing that Arjuna is finding it so difficult to control, let's understand this wonderful purport by Prabhupada. Before we do that, I want you to remember this instruction, which I will repeat at various places. This instruction is shared by one of the transcendentalists, Jada Bharat, to a king. He's a king, but you can see that he's in a humble state where he's bowing down before this spiritually advanced personality. And that's what a person who's maybe materially accomplished, materially advanced, should and must do when he sees someone who's spiritually advanced. And just because he bowed down, realizing his spiritual advancement and his position, Jada Bharat speaks something very, very interesting. So this is the verse which comes in the 5th canto, 11th chapter, one of the smallest chapters in Srimad Bhagavatam, but which talks elaborately about our mind. And if you really want to know what is this entity called mind and how we should deal with, then this chapter must be read in conjunction with this chapter. One of the smallest chapters, as I said, even the Bhagavad Gita smallest chapter has got 20 verses. Do you know which chapter has got 20 verses? What's your name?
12 and 15?
Yeah, that's right. 12 and 15. 12 and 15 have, both the chapters have got 20 verses, but this chapter has got only 17 verses. And this is the last verse of 5th canto, 11th chapter. So the verse is, Bhratravyamenam dadadabraviryam upekshayadhyedhitam apramattaha guror hares charanopasana sastro jahi balikam swayamatma mosam. When Jada Bharat is giving a series of instructions to King Rahugana, that's King Rahugana's position is like all of us. All of us, we think we are very great, very accomplished, very intelligent, very rich, very opulent. We don't need advice, especially spiritual advice. We don't seek. But when Jada Bharat is giving this instruction, he's telling Vratravyam. Vratravyam is a formidable enemy. You know, it's not just an enemy which is weak, which can be just brushed aside. It's very formidable. Vratravyam enam tadadabra viryam. Adabra viryam. This word adabra viryam means it's extremely powerful, very, very powerful. So Jada Bharat, who's advanced spiritually, is giving this instruction, O King Rahugana. Now replace the word Rahugana with your own names. So it could be me, O Sadananda. Okay, what is the instruction? Bhratravyam enam tadadabra viryam. That you have a formidable enemy which is extremely strong, very, very powerful. Adabra viryam. And if you neglect that enemy, sometimes we neglect, sometimes we ignore. Unfortunately, this enemy, when it is neglected, it grows. It becomes more and more powerful. It becomes victorious. Upekshaya adhyadhitam apramattaha. It becomes pramattaha, maddening. So that kind of an enemy is there for all of us. There is no exception to this. And that enemy, unfortunately, lives within us. That enemy, as per Jada Bharat, is our own mind. And he also gives a solution how you can control this turbulent mind. Guror Hares Charana Upasana Astro. There is a weapon of astra, of upasana, of worshipping the lotus feet of Guru and Hare. Lotus feet of the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord. Guru Hares Charana Upasanastro. Jahi Velikam Swayamatma Mosam. That is the only way you can defeat this enemy. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. That's for all of us. It's not saying only for some people who are born in America or born in India, or people who are born in India have migrated to America or whatever. It's actually universal. Uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. O king, please try to conquer the mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. There is a repetition, do this with great care. Let's see today's verse. As we heard this verse, very interestingly, this verse, there are 4 characteristics of the mind which is given here, as given by Arjuna himself. He's telling, what are the 4 characteristics? I'll come to a little later, but if you see the first line of the purport, Prabhupada is writing, the mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence. Although mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. This is the first 2 lines of the purport. So we all want practical solutions because we are living in the practical world. Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna 5,000 years ago in battlefield of Kurukshetra. Why would I pay attention? Because I have got my own family, I've got my own problems to take care, I've got my exams to write, I've got my jobs to take care, so many things we have. So Prabhupada uses, for a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements. Actually, there are so many things which do not go the way we plan. Reversals come, there are challenges which come, and we have to face them because we don't have a choice. And when all these problems are coming in this practical world, it is very difficult to control the mind. Why? Because the mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence. How difficult was it to come to the class? Was it very easy? Honest answer is, so many things. You have to convince your kids. Maybe kids have to convince you. Either way, I don't know what is it. But a lot of preparation is required because mind is giving so many justifications. I'll stay back. Tomorrow class is there, school is there, college is there, work is there. So many assignments, so many challenges and excuses. That is why Arjuna in this verse is telling 4 words, if we pay attention, and very important these words are. Mind is restless, chanchalam. Mind is turbulent, pramathi. Mind is stubborn, dridham. Mind is very strong, balavat. I want to show you a video, and just pay attention to this video. I'll be playing this video. It'll work, okay.
Tomo News presents Turbulence.
Prayers and trying aboard US-bound flight as turbulence terrifies passengers. A flight from Korea to the US was diverted to Tokyo after violent turbulence injured 5 people so badly they needed medical attention. Food everywhere, plates, glassware, and the contents of a flipped beverage cart left the cabin looking like a $2 Thai brothel on a Sunday morning. For the 240 passengers and 15 crew aboard American Airlines Flight 280, this was the most terrifying flight of their lives. Screams, sobbing, and whispered prayers filled the cabin as the hand of God shook the plane like a heroin junkie shakes her baby.
I love my family. I love my family very much. Everybody, please.
The turbulence rocked the plane for nearly a full hour. One passenger reported seeing a flight attendant become airborne and smash into an exit sign above the seats.
Hit your head. Show me the bowl that hit your head. It broke.
The Boeing 777-200 took off from Seoul just after 6 p.m. on the 16th and was due to arrive at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport around 3 a.m. The pilot was forced to abort the original plan and land instead at Japan's Narita Airport. None of the injuries were life-threatening, and the passengers were transferred to another flight on Wednesday to complete their journey.
20 injured on South African Airways jet hit by severe turbulence.
What I was trying to show you is a strong, powerful, heavy aircraft boarded with 200 plus people with a gigantic engine. Also, when it goes through turbulence, actually it becomes so difficult for the passengers, not only for the passengers who are there inside, even the strong wings of the aircraft gets damaged. That's what the raising wind can do to a powerful, mighty airplane. And here our verse is telling turbulent. The word is our mind when it becomes turbulent. Forget about controlling the flight. Our own mind becomes so difficult. Interestingly, when I was reading this, I thought that these 4 words which are used by Arjuna, they are actually in a sequence. I mean, if the first word, if you pay attention, it's called chanchalam, right? Chanchalam, as translated by Prabhupada, is restless. The nature of the mind is to be restless. We are sitting here. You're coming for the second time, I'm guessing. Very difficult to sit peacefully. Mind is, we know the class is not going to go till endlessly. It's going to come to an end. But even the time that we are there in the class or to hear this, mind is not allowing us. So the nature of the mind is restless. And if you see this, as Arjuna is pointing out, is actually the mother of all other qualities. Because the mind is restless, it leads to something else. The mind is restless means the mind has very little rest. English dictionary says restless means less rest. So when the mind has less rest, it becomes disturbed. When we do not have enough sleep, we feel disturbed because there is less sleep. So in dictionary, the word used for less sleep is sleepless. So we may have given enough rest to our body, but if the mind is not rested, no amount of rest to the body will be enough. You might have slept more, but there is a problem which is going on in the mind. It is disturbing, it is agitating, it's going on. If the mind is not rested, if there is no suitable rest for the mind, physical rest will not be enough. Hence, the first word used by Arjuna is chanchalam, and then he says pramathi. Pramathi, as we saw in that video, means turbulent. What leads to turbulence is actually our restlessness in the mind. The restlessness of the mind will lead to becoming turbulent. Restlessness means the mind cannot remain still. But turbulence means the mind is moving in such a great speed and intensity. So imagine there is an issue which is going on in your mind. And the more you become upset about that, the more the mind becomes turbulent, like a strong wind. It picks up speed and it comes to a point, suppose we are upset about something, or we just try to find out why, what is the reason, what made me upset. And these reasons, very often, the mind transforms them into criticism. That is what the mind does. And it turns the episode of being upset into an opportunity to criticize. That is when something goes through this, when someone goes through this turbulence, you cannot come out of it in the right form. Like the plane which is going through the turbulence of the wind, the raising wind, it can deform the wings and different parts of the plane. Similarly, we get molded or squeezed when we go through this turbulence of the mind. The plane, as I said, is huge and the engines are very strong. But when the turbulent wind hits it, that's just two winds on top and the bottom, when they go in the opposite direction, then even the plane gets tossed like a piece of paper. And we ourselves have experienced this practically. There's a little bit of turbulence and how panic it was inside the flight. Imagine there is a mind which is there inside us, each one of us. It becomes turbulent. How precarious it will be. What will be the force of this mind? And this is how the mind, when it is restless and it has become turbulence, it justifies its action and it goes through that negative thing again and again, and it has become turbulent. It's a very, very difficult situation. And once it has become pramati, it leads to dridham. Dridham means stubborn. So the stage which comes after turbulence is the mind assumes a different characteristic. It has become stubborn now. It has made an opinion based on the turbulence and the restlessness, and it is convinced now that the position of myself and what is the position of others. And if we reflect in our lives, we will see that this progression of how we become so mad with the mind is true for all of us. It first starts with a little bit of restlessness, then turbulence, and then stubbornness. And if, since the mind is chanchala and restless, and it turns out to be turbulent, because of turbulence, it changes form and it becomes obstinate. So when the mind decides that someone is at fault, then for the mind, it is the right thing. If the mind decides to give a favorable argument why I should perform an activity, once the favorable argument is framed in the mind, it becomes framed forever. And because the mind is obstinate, it refuses to change. He is the cause. Because of him, this happened. This is the reason. Or I have done a favor. I will not do this. I formed this. This is now the mind has become stubborn. So in Bhagavad Gita and in our Vedic literatures, Krishna says that the nature, swabhava and mind, they are very close. The more the mind is with Krishna, the more malleable is the nature of the individual. The less the mind is with Krishna, the less malleable our nature becomes, because we are stubborn. We don't want to change. And I don't really say that, Balabhat is an outcome of this sequence, but Balabhat is one of the nature of mind, which is strong. So imagine the stubborn mind, which has also got the strength or the power. When the mind becomes strong in being stubborn, that means it becomes mad, pramatha. That is the word that is used. That means we become mad. We lose all our sense of logic. We lose all the reasonable arguments. The reasonable or factual things do not stand even a chance. The irony is that whenever we think of logic, we think of the mind, and that mind is logical. But mind is actually anything but logical. It is absolutely far from being logical. It is not by nature logical, because it is very strong and it is the greatest enemy. So that is why Jadabharat's that instruction, the more you neglect the mind, that means the less you control the mind, and the less you control the mind will grow and grow and grow to such an extent that it covers the constitutional nature of the living entity. And when that happens, then we forget the purpose of our existence. The real calamity that a living entity can go through is forgetting his purpose of existence. Why am I here? Because he's caught up in this stubbornness, this turbulence, this restlessness, the strong force of the mind. He's not able to see. He's not able to see the purpose of life. What is the solution? What do we do? Before we see the solution, that's why I'm saying this important thing to know is it is not for somebody else to do. It's my own mind. It's my own life. I need to do something about it. There is a need for controlling the mind. First, we need to ascertain that. First, we need to come to an understanding and a unanimous conclusion or understanding that I need to take care of my mind. If you are still not convinced, and if you are thinking pramathi, balabat, chanchalam, dridham, whatever those adjectives used by Arjuna, maybe Arjuna has used, not for me, think again. And our scriptures are filled with instructions which says how this mind becomes chanchalam. What is it that makes this mind disturbed? Let's see them. So pay attention to this title that I have, one leads to another, right? Let's see what is the beginning. How does it start? I've got few quotes I want to share before I come to the conclusion and the solution, which is very important for all of us. Of course, Prabhupada has mentioned that in the purport in the last line, but we will come to that. The solution will only make that much of more importance and relevance to us if we understand the nature of the problem. So here in Srimad Bhagavatam, this is a quotation from 11:23:47. It is said that all the senses have been under the control of the mind since time immemorial. And the mind himself never comes under the sway of any other. He is stronger than the strongest, and his godlike power is fearsome. Therefore, anyone who can bring the mind under control becomes the master of all the senses. Throughout the 6th chapter, time and again, Krishna is talking about controlling the mind. You start, in the beginning 6.5, he says that one can degrade, or one can elevate himself, or one can degrade himself based on how he is using his mind. The mind, when it is controlled, it is the best of friend. When it is uncontrolled, it is the worst of the enemy. Why it is the worst of enemy? Here it is mentioned, because always the senses are under the full control of the mind. This is from since time immemorial. And the mind himself never comes under the sway of any other. He is stronger than the strongest, and his godlike power is fearsome. When the mind is disturbed, uncontrolled, the power of that uncontrolled mind is fearsome. It's it's not easy. Therefore, anyone who can bring the mind under control becomes the master of all the senses. One question to all of you is, why mind has this godlike power? Where does it get from? Because mind is an energy of the Lord, where it is mentioned. Bhumirapo nalavayu kham mana buddhirevacha ahankara itiyam bhinna prakriti rashtadaha. Mind doesn't belong to us. It's an external energy of the Lord. Since it is God's energy, it's an energy of the Lord, it has got that power of, godly power. However, someone who does not understand and underestimate the power of mind, who does not have sufficient intelligence, who lacks the willpower and intelligence, and is not able to see what he does. So this is again from Bhagavatam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies." So mind you, person bereft of intelligence, who does not have intelligence, the intelligence, the place for intelligence is filled with something else. We say whatever that you want to use the word. My dear Uddhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind. And when such false knowledge arises within one's consciousness, material passion, the cause of great suffering, pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness. Then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for material advancement. Thus, by constantly thinking of the modes of material nature, a foolish person is afflicted with the unbearable material desires. You see, these words, these are not some simple things. These are very, very powerful, confidential things revealed about our own life, about our own mind. And if we pay attention to this, there is a great secret, there is a great learning that we can take from this, which we can apply in our lives. So when a person is lacking intelligence, when he's unintelligent, bereft of intelligence, first of all, what he does, he falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind. He thinks, I am this body or I am this mind. And when he does that, when this false identification happens, with such false knowledge arises within one consciousness material passion. There is this passion which arises inside this. And when the passion arises, what happens? That becomes the cause of great suffering. That's the cause of great suffering. It pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness, and then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for the material advancement. So, as I'm saying, this is one leading to another. First of all, the power of mind, it is why it is so strong. It has got God-like power, and all the senses are under its control because it is an energy of the Lord. Someone who's underestimating, who doesn't know, who doesn't have the intelligence, and he falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind, and when that happens, such false knowledge arises, then there is passion, and this passion causes great suffering pervading the mind. So let's see what happens when somebody is in the mode of passion. Understood, somebody has lacking the intelligence, and now he has got this mind is contaminated with the modes of material nature, and the passion has overtaken. Then what happens? A person sitting here also nods his head, but nothing goes inside, because the mind is so restless, so turbulent. Afterwards, when we have this discussion and all the devotees are there, and we ask, what was the discussion? What was the discussion? Something comes, because we don't realize that how less control we have over our mind. And if somebody is, again, he's lacking the intelligence and has associated with the modes of material nature, then the first thing that happens is, because of this mode of passion, he starts thinking in the form of I and mine. And very interestingly, Bhagavatam talks about this in this verse. Pumsah striya mithuni bhavam etam tayor mitho hridaya granthi mahu atho griha kshetra sutapta vitter janasya moho ayam aham mameti. How does this mind become so turbulent? That's what we are trying to see. And we have come to this understanding that when the intelligence, somebody is lacking the intelligence, he identifies himself with his body and mind, and then associates with the modes of material nature, especially with the modes of passion, which becomes the cause of its suffering. And the cause of suffering, how it intensifies, it comes from this verse. Attraction between male and female. First thing when it happens is, when somebody identifies oneself with the body or mind, then there is an attraction which develops for the opposite sex. Attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, Pumsa striya mithuni bhavam etam tayor mitho hridaya granthim, there is a knot which is tied between the hearts of male and female. One becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. Ato griha kshetra sutapta bitter. In this way, one increases life's illusions and things in terms of I and mine. I and mine. I and mine. This is me, my body. This is mine. This is my house. This is my ato griha kshetra suta after bitter. This body is mine, this home is mine, this property is mine, these children are mine, these relatives are mine, this wealth is mine. Where does it all started? Because if we don't take care of the mind, it is associating with the modes of material nature. And if it is associating with the modes of material nature, then there is an attraction for opposite sex. Pumsa striya mithuni bhavam. Basic principle of material existence is the attraction between opposite sex. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, one becomes attracted to so many other things. And in that illusion, he sinks. Life's illusion and things in terms of I and mine. Bhagavatam elsewhere it says, one who has failed to control his senses immediately feels attraction upon seeing a woman's form. For a woman, it is man, and for a man, it is woman. Immediately feels attraction, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, when the woman speaks with enticing words, smiles coquettishly, and moves her body sensuously, his mind is immediately captured, and thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence. just as the moth, maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flames. This is what happens. So one is unable to control the mind, one is unable to control the senses, one doesn't know the need of it, one doesn't know the power of it, and the mind, when it is associating with this, develops an attachment for opposite sex, and it becomes so infatuating and so strong that there is because of the, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, that whatever the person does, enticing words, smiling, moves her body, his mind is immediately captured. And thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence, just as the moth, maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flames. One may question, what's wrong? After all, I'm just attracted to another woman, or a woman may say, I'm attracted to a man. What's wrong? Well, that's something very significantly wrong. What Bhagavatam says is, when this attraction develops, the illusory material nature attracts the minute living entity to embrace her, and as a result, he assumes forms composed of her qualities. When we get attracted to material things, material body, material energy, so the illusory material nature attracts the minute living entity to embrace her, and as a result of that, he assumes forms composed of her qualities. So the person who is being attracted assumes the qualities of material nature, assumes forms composed of her qualities. Subsequently, he loses all his spiritual qualities and must undergo repeated deaths. So you embrace the material nature, or you're attracted to the material nature. What it does is, spiritual qualities inside all diminishes. He loses all his spiritual qualities and must undergo repeated deaths. So if spiritual qualities go, then what happens inside? Then the material qualities start manifesting. And you want to know what are those material qualities? If somebody is in the mode of passion, this is given in Bhagavatam, it says material desire, great endeavor, audacity, dissatisfaction even in gain, false pride, praying for material advancement, considering oneself different and better than others, sense gratification, a rash eagerness to fight, a fondness for hearing oneself praised, the tendency to ridicule others, advertising one's own prowess, and justifying one's actions by one's strength are qualities of the mode of passion. So what are the qualities of modes of passion? You see, this is all we can see in our life: material desire, great endeavor, audacity, dissatisfaction even in gain, false pride, praying for material advancement, considering oneself different and better than others, sense gratification, rash eagerness to fight, a fondness for hearing oneself praised, the tendency to ridicule others, advertising one's own prowess, and justifying one's actions by one's strength are qualities of the modes of passion. Still not convinced? What happens when these material qualities keep on growing? Why the material qualities are growing? Material qualities are growing because we have embraced the material nature, and the spiritual qualities have, is gone. He loses all his spiritual qualities. In the conditioned stage, one's conception of life are sometimes polluted by passion and ignorance, which are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these are enemies. What we are not realizing, how this, it all starts with uncontrolled mind. When the mind is not controlled, it is, it is associating with the modes of material nature, and it is developing an attraction for opposite sex. And then what happens, if you develop an attraction, your illusion increases. But you say, what's wrong if I'm just developing an attraction? Well, all the spiritual qualities vanishes within, and you develop all these material qualities. These are the symptoms of material qualities. Imagine you go in a group and where you're filled with people who have got all this hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige. insults, fault finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. What kind of life we will have? Forget about anybody else, even in our own mind, this is all going on. This is just constantly going on. That's how it is becoming turbulent. One who does not control the material senses comes under the control of material desires and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of the mode of passion. Such a person executes material activities, although clearly seeing that the result will be future unhappiness. The person who is doing that, he knows, he gets a glimpse that this is the cause of unhappiness. I am not doing the right thing. Yet he lacks the conviction, the strength to do the right thing. He's not getting the strength and conviction to do the right thing. Seeing that this is going to lead to doom, this is not really going to give me the eternal happiness that I'm looking for, yet he continues to do. Why he's continuing to do? Because he is not able to control his senses. Then there are desires which are multiplying, comes under the control of material desires and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of this mode of passion. Such a person executes material activities, although clearly seeing that the result will be future unhappiness. The desires, how they multiply and what happens. There is a very graphic example of this given in Bhagavatam in the instructions of Prahlad Maharaj, where he's saying, this attachment, when it has become strong and the illusion has become so strong, how it is so difficult to come out of it. How nicely Prahlad Maharaj puts it. How can a person who's most affectionate to his family, the core of his heart being always filled with their pictures, give up their association? Specifically, a wife is always very kind and sympathetic and always pleases her husband in a solitary place. Who could give up the association of such a dear and affectionate wife? Small children talk in broken language, very pleasing to hear, and their affectionate father always thinks of their sweet words. How could he give up their association? One's elderly parents and one's sons and daughters are also very dear. A daughter is especially dear to her father, and while living at her husband's house, she is always in his mind. Who could give up that association? Aside from this, in household affairs, there are many decorated items of household furniture, and there are also animals and servants. Who could give up such comforts? The attached householder is like a silk worm which weaves a cocoon in which it becomes imprisoned, unable to get out, simply for the satisfaction of two important senses, the genitals and the tongue. One is bound by material conditions. How can one escape? This is a precarious situation where we get into this complex web of illusions where it starts with, forgetting our constitutional position, associating with the material modes of nature, which removes or which empties our spiritual qualities and fills our heart with these material qualities, which leads to unlimited desires. And this complex web of unlimited desires produces all abominable, undesirable qualities inside. And one has completely merged into this illusion that this is all real. This is all reality. This is how the Maya unfolds its power. So I want to highlight two verses. What is the hope? What is the solution? From this interesting conversation which has happened between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai, Raya Ramananda Samvad. So in that, Ramananda Rai actually says something very powerful. Aman istarite tomar iha agaman, parama dayalu tumi patita pavana. If we really see that, we want to take rest and shelter at some place, then the only place that we can hold on to is the lotus feet of the Lord, as we saw in the solution earlier, the verse that I have asked you to remember. I'll bring that verse again. We have to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. But with our conditioned mind, with our conditioned intelligence, with the life which is filled with all these material qualities, it is even very extremely difficult to even think of the Lord. But that is why Ramananda Rai is telling, Ama nistarite tumara iha agaman. Lord very mercifully descends as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're going to celebrate his appearance on 17th of March as Gaura Purnima. When the Lord appears as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he does not see any spiritual qualities. Ama nistarite tumara iha agaman. You have descended to this material world to deliver fallen souls like me. Parama dayalu tumi patita pavana. You are the most compassionate. Tumi Patita Pavana, and you are the deliverer of fallen souls, Patita Pavana. And the second thing which he says, Veda Nishtha Madhya Ardheka Veda Mukhe Mane, Veda Nisiddha Papa Kare Dharma Nahi Gane. Many of us, we know what is the right thing to do. Many of us have the intelligence and understanding to follow or to see the right path, yet we lack the conviction. As I was asking at the beginning, how difficult it is to come to temple. It's not easy. We have so many thousands of allurements, thousands of things which are going on in our mind. Doesn't even allow us to come and come to temple where we get a chance to hear from Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. We lack the conviction, the strength to say no to sense gratification, and that can only come when we come in association of devotees. When we come in association of devotees, we get that strength and conviction to see things and do things that we are not able to do, though we know that this is the right thing to do. So this is something you have come here specifically to deliver me. You are so merciful that you alone can deliver all fallen souls. Among human beings, those who are followers of the Vedic principles are considered civilized. Among these, almost half simply give lip service while committing all kinds of sinful activities against these principles. Such people do not care for the regulative principles. So having spoken about all these things and having understood our precarious position in this material world where we are very helpless, that is why the solution which is given by Jada Bharat is so important. Vratravyamenam tadadavraviryam upekshayadhyedhitam apramatta guror hares charanopasana sastro jahi balikam swayamatma mosam. What is the solution given by Jada Bharat? He's telling that it covers the constitution. Oh king, please try to conquer this mind. This is the only way. There is no other way. Please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you really want to take rest and shelter, if you want to give that restless mind the desired, required rest, it has to be given rest in the form of accepting the lotus feet of the Lord. But can we directly approach the lotus feet of the Lord? We can't. We need a pure devotee spiritual master who can connect us to the Supreme Lord. The Lord is a possession of a pure devotee spiritual master. Only when we come in touch with the pure devotee spiritual master, serve his lotus feet, follow his instructions, that we can get Krishna. Krishna is not our property. So that is why it is absolutely essential that one gets in shelter of a pure devotee spiritual master at the earliest. If that doesn't happen in our life, if we have not taken shelter of a pure devotee spiritual master, even if you are chanting Hare Krishna mantra, you will not be able to do it always. You are here close to the temple, you are coming, maybe you have got this thing, you are able to chant. You go little far, you'll forget about even chanting Hare Krishna mantra. Even a person who is initiated, who's there in association of the devotees under the shelter of his spiritual master, he can chant. Moment he goes away, chanting 16 rounds also becomes difficult. It's not easy. That is why when a conditioned living entity takes shelter of a pure devotee spiritual master, he takes away all his sins of his past millions of lifetimes. How many lifetimes have gone where we have lived a life of forgetful of Krishna? We can't even count. Millions of lifetimes have gone. And those accumulated sins, there is no way that one can get rid of. But when someone takes the shelter of a lotus feet of the pure devotee spiritual master, becomes his disciple, that the karma becomes blank, zero, and then he can start fresh. He can he has the hope and the strength to continue chanting that 16 rounds only because he has taken shelter of the lotus feet of his spiritual master. Otherwise, it's impossible. It's very difficult. Ask those people who are chanting 16 rounds outside how easy it is for them. They lack the conviction. They may do it for some time. They are able to do it, but the moment they are little far or they go, that something changes in life, immediately the chanting also comes to an end. So that is why Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavan Jeev. Actually, in every lifetime, we had some father and mother. Father and mother is always available. But to get the shelter of the lotus feet of spiritual master is the biggest benediction. Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavan Jeev. He is not a fortunate person who has got millions of dollars. He is not a fortunate person who has become the president of a country. He is not a fortunate person who has got billions of shares and lots of properties and all those things. Rather, he is the fortunate person who has got the good fortune of having come in touch with a pure devotee spiritual master and has taken his shelter. Because only by his mercy, when he bestows this mercy, that one can get Krishna. And to get Krishna, we have to follow his instructions 100%, not listen to our mind. Because mind, as it is mentioned, even if it is not factual, it is very strong. Gives all kinds of arguments favorable for not doing, for not becoming Krishna conscious and remain in this material world and rot lifetime after lifetime. We say Brahma has got a fabulous lifespan, trillions of years of life, right? How much it is? 340 or something, 340 trillions or something, right? The lifespan of Brahma is given in the 314 trillion years, whatever the Brahma's lifespan. Out of that 314 trillion life, 314 trillion years of lifetime that Brahma has got, 50 years have passed. And in that 50 years, all of us were there, 114, 115, whatever that number of trillions of years of going through different species of life and doing the same thing again and again because of our uncontrolled mind, which is producing these desires where we are associating with these modes of material nature. And then we are forgetting about our spiritual qualities and just finding in, sink and immersed in this network of illusion. Now we have got a good fortune of having come in touch with a pure devotee spiritual master. We have come in a time when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was here 500 years ago. And he has given this process. This process is the most powerful, most tried and tested, most simple thing. But the biggest problem, the biggest enemy in accepting, embracing that is our own uncontrolled mind, which is not allowing us. Look at our precarious position, despite going through so many millions of years of different living in different bodies, we are yet forgetful of our nature and yet forgetful of our relationship with Krishna. So if you really want to control the mind, which is a must, which we don't have a choice, which we must, the choice is to take shelter of a pure devotee spiritual master. If somebody says, is there any other alternative? Can I have some other thing? Maybe I'll not do this. Let's see what scriptures say. Since the living entity is associated with material nature, he is in an awkward position. This is actually in connection with Ajamil's life, who became sinful. He was a Brahmana. He was following all the Brahminical principles. He was following the Vedic injunctions. He associated with a Sudrani. He brought her. He drove away his chaste wife, drove away his pious parents, and associated with them, had 10 kids, did all kinds of sinful activities. In that connection, Sukadev Goswami is telling, since the living entity is associated with material nature, he's in an awkward position. But if in the human form of life, he's taught how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee, the position can be overcome. That awkward position that we are stuck in this complex mess of birth and death, we can come out of it if he gets a chance to associate with the Supreme Lord or his devotee. We don't mind going and associating with the modes of material nature, materialistic people. Unrestrictedly we associate. Open our heart. Hey, come, let's have party, let's enjoy. But when it comes to associating with the Lord, when it comes to associating with the devotees, Ajni, next week we'll do. Is this week a snow day? So many excuses. People, in a temple, hardly people you find, even if there is opportunity where you can come and associate and hear this wonderful instructions of Krishna, how many people are there? But as it is mentioned that he can overcome this position if he gets a chance how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee. My dear Uddhava, I am personally the ultimate shelter and way of life for saintly liberated persons. And thus, if one does not engage in my loving devotional service, which is made possible by associating with my devotees, then for all practical purposes, one possesses no effective means for escaping from material existence. You think there is alternative? Yeah, this is what Krishna is telling to Uddhav just before leaving this material world. I'm personally the ultimate shelter. You're looking for shelter. You're looking for rest. I'm personally the ultimate shelter and way of life for saintly liberated persons. And thus, if one does not engage in my loving devotional service, which is made possible by associating with my devotees, for all practical purposes, one possesses no effective means for escaping from material existence. No means. Absolutely no. There is nothing. The subtle body is endowed with 16 parts: the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, the 5 objects of sense gratification, and the mind. 16 parts. Subtle, something which we can't see, but we know that they are present. What are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses? No, not so complicated. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, smell, touch, right? 5 knowledge acquiring senses. We acquire knowledge through these 5 senses. 5 working senses. What are they? Isika? That's the knowledge acquiring senses. Working senses. Hands, legs, then mouth is speech, and then anus and genitals. These are the 5 working senses. So hands, legs, speech, because you are doing action by this, genitals and the anus. 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 working senses, 5 objects of sense gratification. For eyes, it's beautiful form. For ears, it's sound. For tongue, it is palatable dish. For sense of touch, the object of whatever you can touch. So these are 15, and the mind. The subtle body is endowed with 16 parts. This subtle body is an effect of the 3 modes of material nature. It is composed of insurmountably strong desires, and therefore it causes the living entity to transmigrate from one body to another in human life, animal life, and life as a demigod. When the living entity gets the body of a demigod, he is certainly very jubilant. When he gets a human body, he is always in lamentation. And when he gets the body of an animal, he is always afraid. In all conditions, however, he is actually miserable. His miserable condition is called samshriti, or transmigration in material life. This is 6.1.51. Same in that conversation regarding Ajamila, it is mentioned. Sometimes we think maybe if I become demigod, my life will be good. He is jubilant. But or if he is in the human form of life, it is always lamentation. I could not do this, I could not do this, I could not achieve this, I could not, my sons did not study well. Always some kinds of lamentation. And when he gets the body of an animal, he's always afraid. So doesn't matter what body you are in, it is always miserable. In all conditions, however, he's actually miserable. His miserable condition is called samshriti, or transmigration in material life. So if somebody thinks there is some alternative, I'll do something else, I'll elevate my position, I'll improve my things, it's not going to work. This material world is defined by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, dukkhalayam asaswatam. Mam upetyatu punarjanma, dukkhalayam asaswatam, napnuvanti mahatmanav. 8.15 or 17. 8.15, Krishna says, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Mam upetyatu punarjanma, dukkhalayam asaswatam. This is that same place which is filled with miseries and temporary. Napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gata. Once you achieve that perfection, you come out of the cycle of birth and death. You come out of this miserable place, which is anyway temporary. They have attained the highest perfection. They attain me. So in conclusion, we spoke about the formidable Bhratravyam enam idam adavram. It's a very formidable, very strong enemy that we are living with. And we saw the solution. The solution is, if you really want to cut into pieces, then take shelter of the lotus feet of a spiritual master, a pure devotee, bona fide spiritual master, follow his instructions 100%. If we do that, if we engage in devotional service to Guru and Krishna, that's a weapon, and do the devotional service, upasana astra, then we can cut this illusion. So it is very important to have the shelter of a pure devotee spiritual master and follow these instructions. And we saw that there is no other alternative. But if somebody says, what if I'm practicing devotional service, but I'm not initiated? Here is a conclusion from the purport of Madhya Lila. where Prabhupada is quoting from one of the literatures from the Goswamis. And here the translation is, unless one is initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, all his devotional activities are useless. A person who is not properly initiated can descend again into the animal species. Can anybody check that I will not take birth again in this animal species of life? Nobody can check that. Nobody can guarantee that. And this valuable human form of life, where we had the opportunity to take initiation from a bona fide spiritual master, we just somehow we don't take advantage of it, then even the devotional activities are useless. The mantra that we are chanting also becomes nisfala unless we come under the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. It has its own power and potency, no doubt about it. But when it is in association with the pure devotee, when we have taken his shelter and chant, the mantra carries a special potency. I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, in the last section, it was mentioned like if someone is not initiated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever spiritual activity he or she is doing, that's a useless. I mean, so for example, if somebody is chanting and doing some sevas, even though that is not even like that, even though that is also not of any worth, I mean, in terms of his spirituality path.
No, where that instruction I shared is basically to create that kind of an urgency or understanding or need to take shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. Unless we do that, of course, whatever you are doing as per the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master. You are not doing whimsically. It has definitely the impact. But there is a need to get the initiation or diksha, because it has a very powerful significance in our life. If we are if we are serious about advancement in spiritual life, then we must be. That's why the instruction of scriptures is Tad Vijnanartham Sagurum Evabhi Gachet. Gachet in Sanskrit means it's not like you may think of, why don't you consider, it's good for you. You must approach those lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. Tad Vijnanartham Sagurum Evabhi Gachet. Who knows how much time we have? Who knows whether this opportunity will knock at our door one more time or not? And why delay? Why unnecessarily delay? This is the process which Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadikshanti te jnanam jnanena tattvadarshina. If you want to understand this truth can only be revealed by a tattvadarshi guru. When we take his shelter, tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. We have to accept him. We have to inquire from him submissively and render devotional service. Then this truth will be manifested in our heart. This is not some material knowledge which we can conquer, which we can master by our skills, intelligence. This requires somebody to reveal it in our heart. And that person who does that is a pure devotee spiritual master. Any question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah.
I have one question. Yeah.
Yes.
So when you were talking about the mind, and then you were saying that one leads to the other, and you said that restlessness of the mind leads to turbulence, and then further the mind becomes stubborn. So, so my question to you is, what exactly happens with the stubborn mind? I mean, how does it get into the, maybe I, did not catch it there. Like, how does it get into the material existence? And then, how does it get attracted to the material nature?
Yeah, I think I explained that. So when it becomes stubborn, the word that is used in Bhagavatam is it carries like a godly power. Like God, it has got that power to justify and to convince you that whatever you are doing is the right thing. You don't need to change anything. Your action is the best. That gets into that kind of a mode. And it all happens. When that happens, that stubbornness happens, then the mind automatically associates with the mode of passion, material modes of passion, or lower modes, ignorance, which anyway it does. But stubbornness, it just it enhances that. So when it associates with the modes of material passion, material mode of passion, the first thing that happens is the development of an attraction for opposite sex. And then that illusion further gets enhanced or increased when there is a strong knot which is being tied, that I am this body, this is my mind, I and mine, aham mameti. This is my husband, this is my children, this is my house, this is my property, this is my this thing. And I think I have to protect, I have to take care of this. This is what is my life. If I increase this, if I enhance my material things, I'll be happy in this world. And I more and more associate with this modes of material nature, more and more the desires increase in my heart, and the more and more my spiritual qualities diminish in the heart. Spiritual qualities, the moment it is diminishing, material qualities are increasing. What are the symptoms of those material qualities? Envy, pridelessness, the desire to, the expectation to feel the necessity of being praised for your work. All these things comes, finding faults, ridiculing others, all these things will start developing. So that's how it becomes, the mind is just it's a mess. It's a mess of so many complicated things. So to find a solution for this, because mind, though it's ideally subservient to intelligence, it is not. The only way we can control this, tame this, first we need to understand the need and a necessity, is by superior instructions of a pure devotee spiritual master, 100% loyal. I can't listen to my mind, because mind gives all kinds of justifications for not doing the right thing. Even if I'm convinced that this is the right thing, I lack the strength and conviction to do it myself. So I need to come in association of devotees. I need to follow the instructions of spiritual master, and I need to take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Does that help?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Any other question? So before I conclude, we will see the next verse, which is spoken by the Lord himself. So mind you, always keep it in mind that Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue which is happening between the Supreme Lord and Arjuna. So wherever there is a transition, so the Lord is speaking for some time and Arjuna says something, we got to be extra careful on those questions or those places where Arjuna is asking further doubts or seeking some more clarifications. And again, when Krishna begins to speak, what is the first thing that he speaks? So in the last two verses, in today's class and the last class, Arjuna expressed his inability, impractical, and saying that this is impractical and unendurable. I can't do this. This looks fantastic on theory, but cannot be done. And today he said that this is chanchalam, pramati, balabad, dridham. These are the four characteristics of the mind. And it is, I may possibly control the raising wind, but I can't control my mind. Wait to hear what Krishna says in the next verse. The solution which I spoke today, whatever I spoke, we will see that in Krishna's words, what he says. What he says, which can be done by each one of us, even in this precarious, helpless condition of living with the uncontrolled mind, how we can make it controlled. That's the solution. That's the beauty of Bhagavad Gita, and that we will see it in the next class. Before we close, can I request all of you to come in front of your camera and raise your hands? We will chant once Hare Krishna Mahamantra and stop. I'm appearing in multiple places. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining.
Hare
Oh,
Krishna.
Ankit. I forgot her name. What's her name?
Iksha.
Iksha, yeah. How is she now? How old is she?
She's 17 months, Prabhuji.
17 months? Okay, good.
Correct.
Nice. And then how many more months she'll be here in Massachusetts?
Another 2-3 months, Prabhuji.
Okay, good. Nice. Hope to see you soon.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.